highly reflective surfaces can be traced back for millennia as a meditative and contemplative tool.
This is Dean Radin. He's the author of The Conscious Universe, the scientific truth of psychic phenomena. He's also a visiting scientist at Interval Research Corporation in Palo Alto, California. It's a startup company owned by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft.
In the Tibetan tradition, one of the ways of training a student how to meditate properly was to sit him on an insulated chair, insulated from ground, in front of a highly polished copper surface. There's something about this system which would enhance the meditative experience. And so the copper wall study was looking at whether or not it really does enhance the experience, whether it makes a difference, and whether there are any electrical effects that are picked up. And the answer is yes to all of that.
The idea that I had in mind was, if we find any electrical effects, and this is straightforward electricity, nothing mystical about it, just absolute straightforward electricity. If we find electrical effects, then we can assume that probably there was something that generated it, in the same way that lightning generates thunder. And that might be, at some future date, investigated as what in India was called etheric energy.
That's Elmer Green on the line. He's the father of biofeedback, a technique for monitoring brainwaves, which helps people manage their emotional states. It was developed at the Menninger Clinic decades ago. He was the lead scientist in the copper wall experiment at its inception in 1983. The most dramatic results at the Menninger Clinic have been recorded with practitioners of therapeutic touch, a kind of laying on of hands employed by clerics and other spiritually based healers. Sudden bursts of high-voltage electrical energy have inexplicably radiated from these people.
That is something that the Tibetans talk about, the Hindus talk about, and the healers talk about it. In other words, they say, if you give me the name of the person you want me to focus attention on, it doesn't make any difference how far away they are. In other words, if I meditate and send energy to them, the healing effects will be the same if they're next door or if they're in the next county.
That is a possibility, that there is some way of maybe some individuals are electromagnetically different, or they develop into that and they can influence other folks. You can imagine, for example, that if you were carrying a device that was broadcasting at some electromagnetic band that just so happened to interfere with some of the neurological processes in a person, then that person walking around would be perceived by others as very strange. They may not make a link that this is the person, but whenever that person's around, weird stuff happens. Well, that's technologically probably even feasible. I mean, microwave generators and all kinds of strange things can be used to introduce odd perceptions and possibly even knock somebody out.
Tibetan Rinpoches, literally translated most precious lamas, instruct students of Buddhism on a number of levels. There are oral transmissions, which accompany various ritual initiations, usually of an elaborate nature, and there are teachings that are simply felt and taken in. The Lama generates positive feeling, says Zasep Tuko Rinpoche, to create a sense of well-being. When a High Lama enters a space, it becomes charged with his energy, so much so that some people can't handle it. I've witnessed students blanking out during a teacher's commentary. Others become susceptible to nervous tics and bewildering compulsions. And it's common to see and hear things, seemingly directed by the Rinpoche to one's personal attention, that are nonetheless unheard and unseen by others sharing the room. Paul Devereaux.
The classic case of a powerful effect on other people by a spiritual master is the famous practice of darshan, of passing on an altered state, a state of enlightenment, by the master touching the disciple or blowing on their forehead or doing some little physical gesture, usually involving a physical contact, that for a short, brief period will give the disciple the actual inside knowledge of a state of enlightenment, or at least a heightened state of consciousness. It's possible that the brain rhythms of these highly charged people can actually have an effect on perhaps the electromagnetic environment around them. We all produce magnetic fields out of our brains. It can be measured around our skulls. So it's highly possible, I guess, that a master, an adept, has stronger fields that extend further, that can perhaps trigger reciprocal states or some sort of physical alteration in the brain rhythms of people near them. So I think there may well be an actual measurable material mechanism surrounding these type of people.
Dr. William Roll.
Well, there is some evidence that certain individuals can produce electromagnetic fields. Certain individuals seem to have that capacity. In other cases, another is a possibility that individuals modulate ambient electromagnetic energy and focus it in certain directions that can cause object movements or perhaps apparition-type experiences.
Diary, Vancouver. A visit with Arthur Erickson, the architect. He talked about his mentor, the painter Lauren Harris. Our conversation centered around Madame Blavatsky and her theosophy, a central force in Harris's life and work as an artist. He painted what he saw, Erickson said. Even the abstract stuff? Oh yes, Carr too. I envisioned Emily Carr's swirls of radiant light, a trademark of her West Coast landscapes. The landscape spoke to them. Erickson said it was the energy of the earth. And then, out of the blue, Erickson told me about a Brazilian he met who emitted lightning. Oh yeah, I thought. Sensing my incredulity, Erickson said the fellow had been struck by lightning and was somehow able to emulate it. He did it to me, he said.
And what he had you do as part of his healing treatment was to lie down, and he would sit at the foot of the bed on the floor and begin to breathe and build up this energy, and then suddenly the whole room, lightning was flashing all over the place and running through your body, and oh yeah. And I was watching when this happened to him, and I could see it just streaming through him. And no, it's quite amazing.
Now, this is not an unusual observation.
Dr. Michael Persinger.
The idea of having coronal discharges and other types of discharges has been reported. It's more likely to occur in underdeveloped countries where you have more risk of unusual prenatal development and congenital anomalies taking place. Correlates to that have included at least 3 cases of individuals who had such great electrical potential stored in their bodies that when they touched individuals, they were shocked. And obviously these individuals had very few close friends. And the current induction was quite significant to knock a grown man off his feet. The other important feature to realize is that the human being has literally billions of synapses. They are usually oriented in quasi-random ways throughout the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system. If many of these synapses were emphatic, that is, they were connected by electrical connections rather than by chemical connections, and one would not need very many of these, you would have the capacity to be like an electric eel. I mean, the electric eel is a very small animal, can generate a fatal shock because of the alignment of the nerves and the potentiation of the action potentials and the nature of the gap junctions. If even a small component of that was duplicated in a human being, you'd have the potential to generate a tremendous current that to the grounded person could be potentially lethal.